Genesis chapter 24 is where we ended last week. Genesis chapter 24, verse 67 is where we ended last week with Rebekah's life changing in a moment. One moment she's minding her own business, doing what she's supposed to be doing, getting water for her family, and the next she's on a camel ride back to Canaan, getting married to Isaac, right? So just like that, poof, your life can change, right? Then we pick up in Genesis chapter 25. Genesis 25, verse 20 and 21 is where we will be starting today. The Bible says, "And Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah to wife, the daughter of Bethuel the Syrian of Pandanaram, the sister to Laban the Syrian. And Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife because she was barren. And the Lord was entreated of him, and Rebekah his wife conceived." All right, so how old was Isaac when he got married? 40, right? Okay, Isaac was 40 when he got married. I know this is in a more mature group, right? I don't want to say older, but more mature group, right? But what does that tell you? Randy, that you are pretty old. Very good. Or that you are old. I don't know about pretty, right? What does that tell you? Ian, what does that tell you? Okay. What does that mean for you, Ian? What does that mean for somebody your age, Ian?
Somebody my age?
Yeah.
I guess I got to wait another 9 years.
Is that a problem? Not for a man? Sure. What's the stigma, unless you're Sarah, very good. What's the stigma that is placed on young people today? You got to get married, right? It's right away. If you're not in college, boom, why aren't you married? Once you're married, when are you having kids? When you have a kid, when are you having another kid? When you have kids and another kid, then it's when you're having grandkids. It's like, all right, back off with the pressure. Say it again? And great grandkids, right? Very good. So there's time, right? We've talked about this before where God's perception of time is not our perception of time, right? Our importance that we place on time is not the same as what God puts on time, okay? And like Dennis mentioned, even Sarah, okay? Let's see. So the next question is, we see that Rebekah was barren, right? So the question is did Isaac know the promise that God gave to Abraham? Did Isaac know the promise that God gave to Abraham? Why do you say yes, Darlene? Sure. How many times do you think Isaac's heard this story? Right? Every birthday, his mother, you know how long we waited for you? Do you know how long I was in labor with you? Do you know how much, all the mothers, they have those labor stories and they hold them against their kids forever. Right? My mom still reminds me of how I came early and messed up her vacation time and how she was leaving her work at the time and I jacked up her whole vacation time. She still reminds me of that, right? Ian, do you still get that? Every day, right? Okay. So Isaac knew the promise. Okay, So Isaac knew the promise because he's probably heard that story over and over again, right? And do you think Isaac felt the pressure of the promise? Because think about what the promise is, right? You'll be a multitude and, sand of the sea and all that, and all this is going to be yours. And year 1 goes by, no kids. Year 5 goes by, no kids. Year 10 goes by, no kids. 15 goes by, no kids. 19 goes by, no kids. Right? Do you think Isaac is feeling any pressure about this promise? Randy? I should know. Why should I know? Why? What? I'm the one asking the questions. Nice try, Randy. Right? Do you think Isaac felt any pressure? Sure. Why, Mark?
Because where's the promise? It wears on you. You have to see it.
Hope deferred? Right? Okay. So there's some pressure probably that's there. Okay. It says then in verse 21 that Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife because she was barren. Okay? Why did Isaac entreat the Lord for his wife? Randy? Entreated means to ask earnestly, to beg or to plead. Why is Isaac begging for his wife? Why is Isaac going to the Lord and pleading for his wife?
The promise that he gave Abraham and starting to wear on him, just like it wore on Abraham and Sarah waiting all those years.
Okay. So there's two different pieces to what Mark said, right? Where he knew the promise, right? He knew the promise, which begs the question, why ask? If you know there's a promise, why do you ask? God has to fulfill it. He promised it. Wife?
I think part of the culture was that the women had babies. Yeah. That was their job. And she wasn't having babies, and I think the other women were bugging her just like Hagar did with Sarah.
Oh, other women pressure. Yeah. Good old women pressure.
Which is why her husband entreated the Lord for her.
Okay, Peter, you had your hand up?
Perhaps he realized he had the same weakness as his father and did not want to repeat what Hagar mistake.
Oh, so it's a preemptive strike, this entreating. Look, Lord, I know I'm going to screw this up, so I need you to come through now because it's going to be a mess if I get involved. That's nice. I like the preemptive strike theory. Right? I know my tendencies, Lord. Oh, what does that tell us about ourselves then? If we know our own tendencies, if we know our own weaknesses, what should we do? Right? Draw nigh unto God. It's like, look, God, I know this is my area of weakness. I know I'm going to mess this up, so I really need your help with this. Right? You want me to have, I know there's a promise. I know there's a promise. Look, I want to have faith. But look, you have to help me in having the faith. I've seen you come through before. I've seen you provide before. But look, I'm feeling the squeeze here. I need some help. Right, Randy?
The world needs some help in faith right now.
Yeah, that's true. Very good. All right. So, pressure of the promise. Verse 26. End of verse 26 tells us, and Isaac was 80 years old when she bare them, and those are her sons, right? Who are the sons of Isaac and Rebekah? Who are the sons of Isaac and Rebekah? Esau and Jacob. Darlene, I don't like you. Esau and Jacob. Right? Who are the sons? Who are the sons of Isaac and Rebekah, Clint? Jacob and Esau. I like Clint better. Jacob and Esau. Thanks for ruining the curve, Darlene. Do what I can, right? Okay. And this will come into play in just a little bit, right? Okay, so we'll come back to that. Okay, so Isaac entreated the Lord. He knew the circumstances of his birth. He knows that, look, it's been 20 years. We don't know, though, at what point he entreated the Lord for his wife. We want to assume it's at year 19 and in year 20, boom, they have kids. But we don't know that for sure. Okay? Randy. What? Oh, yeah. God knew when he would ask. God knew when he would provide.
I would think it might have been a continual thing.
Oh, a continual thing. Starting when?
Shortly after he was married.
Does that make it easier or harder? Harder? Harder. Each day then, if we go back to his weaknesses, right, his tendencies, his family, and we think, I know I'm going to have a problem in this area, unless I give it to God. How frequently do we have to give it to God? Every day, right? What'd you say, Mark? As many times as it takes, right? Randy?
Pastor teaches about try to avoid things that they're going to tempt you. Also that's something we can do. But
Right, avoiding temptations, very good. All right, so it could be a continual thing starting off on day one. Look, I don't want to be like my dad. I don't want to screw up like my dad did. And so help me be on the straight and right and keep me there. Or it could be, okay, God, I'm feeling the squeeze here. I need some help, right? Peter.
I also think God knows that tendency for most of us would be if God answers right away, we tend to forget him. So God sometimes lingers in answering prayers so we stay in a relationship with him, if you will.
He drags that out just to keep us close.
As he meets his wife, of course, is out meditating. So he did spend time with God.
Sure. He spent time with God. What do you think then? Okay. So if the goal then is to keep Isaac close to the Lord, why do you think then God used that particular circumstance as the means to do it? Why the barrenness of his wife despite the promise? Because we don't see that as we flip into Jacob into later chapters. And he's having kids all over the place, right? So he doesn't have that same lingering, the deferring of the promise. That seemed to come pretty quick. Who needed to be closer to God, Jacob or Isaac? Right? They both do. Because as we read some of their stories and we get into later, Isaac was, okay, dude, nice job.
Jacob's life's to get him on his knees.
Sure. But then, okay, so we saw what happened with Abraham. Why do we see those same types of things with Isaac, but then not with Jacob or Esau? Right? Because we have the story of, in 26, Abimelech in Gerar, right? And Isaac says of Rebekah, well, she's my sister. Well, not even close, dude. Right? Why are you pulling that same stunt, but staying close to God with the childbirth one?
God out in all these things. Obviously, with Abraham, child of promise, of course, representing Christ.
Right?
As far as Isaac, I'm wondering if maybe God had to have him a little older because he did favor Esau. So he did tend to let his fleshly mind
Right?
have some say. And so I think maybe God was maturing him in the sense that he'd be more spiritual, more prayerful, that he would see that Jacob was God's choice in the long run.
No, that's good that Isaac did have flesh tendencies, right? As we see towards his Esau and Jacob, right? He favored Esau, just like Peter said. But why did he favor Esau? Why did Isaac love Esau? That's not what it says. It's not what it says.
Because of his venison.
The venison, the meat that he brought. Venison, the meat, whichever way that went, right? Yeah, his stomach, his flesh, right? It's interesting as we get into that, and that's a little bit jumping ahead, but there is a focus, and there's even a focus on Esau and his tendencies and Jacob and his tendencies. So the reason that Isaac and Abraham had those same types of the way God used and worked in their life to keep them close to him is different than what Jacob had. Because his was more of a heart issue. His stuff was inside, where Esau, Isaac, and probably even Abraham were more outward. And we'll see that in a little bit, hopefully. All right. Let's see. So in verse 21 then, we saw that Rebekah conceived. And we like to think, because of punctuation then, that this happened right away. Because all that's separating the prayer and the result is a comma. But that is not necessarily true. Okay? So just keep that in mind. And then we have going on in verse 22. And the children struggled together within her being Rebekah, and she said, "If it be so, why am I thus?" And she went to inquire of the Lord. So what happened here? What happened in 22? Randy. Rebekah prayed. Why? Well, she had a child. At the point she had children in her womb. Why did she go to the Lord? She's like, this is normal. Something's funny. Feels weird. Okay? So what did Rebekah do? What did Rebekah do? I hear mumbling, but nothing loud enough to actually hear. What, Tony?
Inquired of the Lord.
Who did?
Rebekah.
Rebekah inquired of the Lord. What does that tell you?
Because it's the first time, anybody's having a twin.
Sure, she's confused, but what does she do? You mean directly? Directly to God? Rebekah goes directly to God with her prayer? So women don't need a mediator between themselves and God? Oh, you mean that she didn't have to have Isaac go and say, look, I need you to pray to God for me and find out what's happening here? Darlene, no, it doesn't. All right. Did God answer Rebekah's prayer? Yes, right? How do you know? Read it, Ederlin. What does it say in 23?
And the Lord said unto her, 2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels. And the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger.
All right, so she goes directly to God with her prayer. And what happened? Randy.
We ask God in prayer.
What's that again?
We always happens when we ask God things in prayer.
Which means what? He answers. He answered who? Rebecca. He answers her directly. So what does that tell you about the difference between man's prayer and women's prayer? There is no difference. Right? Exactly. There is no difference. There's no mediator required. Right? There's no importance level attached to it. There's no favoritism. Exactly. Right? So that's what that tells us there. God answers her directly. There's two nations, two manner of people. One's going to be stronger than the other, and the elder will serve the younger. So, do you think Rebekah told Isaac the answer to her prayer? A, do you think Isaac knew she went to the Lord in prayer? And then B, do you think she told him? Mumble, mumble, mumble. It's not mentioned. That's why I said, do you think? Ha ha. Randy. Randy doesn't think. All right, very good. Ian.
I don't think that Rebecca told Isaac, because in the end, when he wants to give Esau his blessing, he doesn't seem to know anything about that.
Okay. All right, very good. Ian says he doesn't think that she told because of the way Isaac still tried to give Esau the blessing at the end. All right? What else? What do you think, Bob?
I think she kept it to herself
Why?
because I think she maybe didn't want to influence Isaac. And
Oh, she didn't want to influence Isaac. That's interesting, considering the plot that she hatches with Jacob later, right? Not wanting to influence anything, right? Well, that could be, right? Because there's a bunch of time that goes by, and again, there's a promise there that is deferred as well. Okay, Valerie?
I think she told them because God made women a certain way.
Which way?
For one, to desire their husband
Okay,
and to talk with their husband.
okay.
I just can't imagine that such a huge thing would happen in her life, and she would be like, "Oh, I love this man, but I don't want to share it with him."
Okay. That's encouraging for Ben, right? Right? Good.
Some of it, but not all of it. Maybe she told her that she was going to have twins, but she didn't tell everything that God told her.
Okay. So you think he told the twin part, but not the who's going to end up ruling over who part. Randy?
I think men have been trying to figure out women forever, huh?
All right, wife.
I think there was cultural expectations.
Man, you like this cultural stuff.
Of the oldest one being naturally chosen, or whatever you want to call it, inheriting everything.
No, everybody knows that older siblings are awesome.
So I don't know. She probably did tell him, but I'm wondering if he was kind of fighting against that, and that's why he kind of, I like Esau. He gives me good food. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I don't know.
Me personally, I don't know if I think that she told him. Because if we look in 24, what happens here? What happens in 24? There's a word there that makes me think that. Yeah, it says behold. Yeah, exactly. And when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, as in, lo and behold, there were twins in her womb. Right? Like it was kind of a surprise. Like, okay, even though in 23, the Lord doesn't say, okay, Rebecca, there's twins. Got it? Right? It's definitely alluded to. There's two kinds of people, two manner of people, right? Two nations are there. Get it? Two. whether she understood that or not, she doesn't go back to the Lord and go, okay, I don't get it. What? Right? We don't see that. But at the end, when she is actually delivered, behold, twins. Okay? So I don't know that she told. And the way we see her act later on in dealing with Jacob and the blessing and all those things makes me think she just kind of kept that stuff in her heart or her head there, Darlene.
Often women will, as the Bible says, ponder things in their heart.
Yeah, I was just thinking that with Mary. Right. Not necessarily share everything, Valerie. Come on. Sharing or pondering?
2 nations in your womb.
Yes.
That's a lot of people.
You might say behold, but she wondered what was going on with her birth. She knew she was having twins. God had told her. She knew it was different, even though she had never had children before. She knew there were some kids were punching each other in there or something.
There's a lot of activity going on in there.
I think she's probably twice this size.
Yeah, I'm sure she's seen a pregnancy before, right? This isn't normal. Why am I thus? I should be thus. Chuck.
I think we all know men and women are different.
Oh, men and women are
That's
different.
probably an understatement.
Just for those on the live stream, men and women are different.
And we aren't talking about that. We're talking about psychologically our behavior, the way we conduct ourselves.
Yeah.
And sure, they've done studies. Women will say more words. They talk more.
Mm-hmm.
But over the years, there's no doubt in my mind that women are far more discreet, far more likely not to say something they don't have to say. And men, because of their egos, which is different from women's, and I know women can testify to that, they want to tell something they know. If God talked to you or me, Eric, we'd probably tell somebody unless he told us not to. A woman is not that way. You might think it's my own version of things, but
I do think it's your own version of things. That's okay. Well, think about it this way, right?
So I'm militating towards she didn't tell anybody.
Okay. She didn't tell anybody,
And I think
which is
the way-
fine.
The way she behaved towards Jacob later sort of betrays the fact that she, I don't think she told Isaac, so, but it doesn't tell us, does it?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. But there are examples and there's things that we can glean from it, even the parts that we don't get. And the point that you're trying to make about women being more discreet than men, I would challenge you with Titus and saying that godly women should be more discreet because that's what they should have been taught, which means that is not their natural tendency. And then if you look in Proverbs where it talks about the strange woman, what's a characteristic of her? She's loud and stubborn and in the streets. Right? So there's a difference in women where you may have a good example of a woman sitting next to you, and that's why you think that. But you're welcome. Thank you for hitting that one. There you go. But there is a difference between a godly woman and an earthly woman, right? Same for a godly man and an earthly man, right? So we can't just sweep everybody under that same rug, right? Randy?
Being a godly woman, pray to God for the answer. I'm sure whatever God told her, whether it was to tell Isaac or not to tell, was the right answer.
That's an interesting question, Randy, is whether Rebecca asked God, should I tell Isaac? Right? Valerie, I'm going to put you on the spot because you tell your husband everything.
No, I don't.
Wait, what? You said. Yeah. Do you pray about what to tell your husband? You don't have to answer that. I'll just let you think.
I do
But
want
there's
to
a
say
question.
something,
Go
though.
ahead.
I get what you're saying now about not wanting to influence, Because there have been times where I think I've gotten an answer from the Lord and I've just said, can you pray about this?
Okay.
Yeah.
So I do, maybe I'm swayed on the whole that, because, you don't want to tell your husband what the.
You don't want to be wrong.
You don't want to have him jump aboard because it's what you want. You want him
Sure.
to do it because it's what he's supposed to be doing.
Yeah, there is the influence thing. There's also a time and a place for each, right? There is a time and a place to keep your mouth shut, right? Welcome to being discreet. There is a time and a place where he's looking for an answer, and your off-the-cuff statement is God's answer to his prayer, right? So there is a time and a place for both. So there's not just one concrete, I always have to keep my mouth shut. Or I have to say everything that pops into my head because it's of the Lord, right? It's not like that. There's examples that are there in both. So we have twins. We have what the Lord tells her, that one people shall be stronger than the other, and the elder shall serve the younger, right? And what's interesting is how the Lord fulfills that, or how we see it, evidence of it fulfilled. Other than Darlene, when you ask who are the children of Isaac and Rebekah, they're going to go Jacob and Esau. Because the younger serving the elder. That's how they pop into our heads most commonly, right? Is Jacob and Esau. Jacob and Esau. That's the way their names order come across. In verse 25, we have Esau, and the first came out red all over like in hairy garments, and they called his name Esau. And 26, and after that came his brother out, and his hand took hold on Esau's heel, and his name was called Jacob. Right? So what do we know about Esau in verse 25? Peter. Okay, back to the previous, he says with a snicker. Okay.
I'm thinking, listen to everything here. Maybe she says something, and he didn't necessarily believe it because he didn't hear it from God. And why would God tell her, not me? Maybe man's ego got in the way.
Okay.
So it's later on, when the trickery is finally worked, then he finally gives the blessing. So either she reminded him or he remembered that he had been told. That's the way it was supposed to be years later. Because
What's a man gonna say though, Peter? You never told me that.
as their lives go on, they're obviously each one of them favors one, and they're both wrong in picking favorites, but they did.
Right? Okay. So we talked a little bit about the favoritism that's there and why Esau is favored, and it's because why? He brought the venison. Right? So again, it's feeding Isaac's flesh is the only reason why he favors Esau. Okay? Who loves Jacob? Rebekah loves Jacob. Why? Randy.
Family dynamics going on in there.
Yeah, there's a ton of family dynamics. Ederlin, why? Why? Why is he always helping her out in the house? Why? Why is he a homeboy?
Because that's how.
He's got his
Rebecca-
cap backwards and
It's probably how Rebecca brought him up.
why? Why did Rebekah bring him up that way?
Probably because God is using her for his future plan. Like he was preconditioned by God so that his plan will be, fulfilled.
Wife?
I think she was protecting him.
Protecting him for what?
Protecting him from, dangerous hunting or situations where he could be harmed, where Esau, Isaac went out with Esau hunting and all of that stuff. And she wanted him at home just to keep him safe because she knew that he was the chosen one.
To keep him safe. So Rebekah kept Jacob at home to keep him safe.
At least as a child.
To keep him safe. Oh, man, I hope not. Tony.
Just to even the playing field, because if
Yeah, Tony, even the playing field.
if Isaac is already, favoring Esau, being a mother, usually they wanted to make sure that both kids were like,
Oh, that's lame, Tony.
that's lame.
Right? That's lame. So, okay, so you get twins, right? You get twins, and it's like, okay, dear, you got to pick one, and then whichever one you don't want, I'll pick the other one as my favorite just to keep the playing field level. Oh, that's horrible. I hope that's not the case. That'd be terrible.
Because he saw in Jacob, he has the promise, because he's the one who will be served by Esau later on.
Wait, who saw the promise?
Rebecca, because it was promised to her that, the younger or the elder will be serving the younger.
This is precondition.
Verse 23 says what, Yoli?
Says there, two manner of people should be separated from their bowels, and the one people shall be stronger than his other people, and the elder shall serve the younger.
Okay, so which type of people you like? The one who leads. Now you're talking. Well, now it makes sense, right? Who does she like and why? Because, wait a minute, who does Isaac like and why? Well, it's not God's fault. Because, okay, when does Esau start hunting? When he's 3? Ian? Were you out hunting at 3?
I was not.
You were not.
Maybe Esau, though.
Maybe Esau, right? He's got his little boat. Pling, right? Okay. Randy?
I hunt with my dad, I get my deer from Yavarim, but Peter's thing going backward. When your wife says she's trying to protect her husband, I just want to remind you, you're saying things here, and it's being listened to, so just as long as
Yeah, I know it's being listened to. Peter?
God obviously gives people the personalities
Yeah.
as well, so it may have nothing to do with her trying to keep him safe and everything. My brother right behind me, him and I, we were adventurous out every day on the farm, in the woods. The brother behind that always stayed home.
Yep.
Because this is personality.
Sure.
Stay stuck around the house. So just their personalities, of course, which God gave them. But I don't know if it's all the influence of the parents as much as maybe their personality themselves.
Okay, Chuck?
The word that was chosen here,
Which word? Where are you?
27.
27.
Jacob was a plain man,
Okay.
dwelling in tents.
Plain man dwelling in tents,
Now,
yes.
my Nelson Bible gives you the definition, whether we can trust that or not, but, the word that was used there, let me find it. It says mild, in other words, maybe not so aggressive. And it says literally complete. So they must be drawing from other places that word was used in Hebrew.
Okay.
And there's a sense of that he's mild.
He's a mild, a complete man, not the aggressive tendencies of Esau.
So I just think some of that, like with Isaac, his son is out there being a man's man, if you will.
Okay. Okay.
And the other one, not so, but more, maybe he was a little more cerebral, maybe a little more of a thinking person, not just an acting person.
Okay.
Now, we're just taking that from this word here.
Sure.
It's there for a reason.
Right. Yeah, everything is in there for a reason, which is interesting that he is described as a plain man. How is Esau described? A cunning hunter?
Meaning skillful.
Right? Cunning. Where do we have Esau? So he's a cunning hunter. He's skillful. What else? How is he described in 25? What do we know about him? Okay? It's hairy, because that's what you wanted to know, right, Bob? He's hairy. What else? What color? Red. Okay. What do we know about Jacob? Chuck just alluded to it. It's plain, mild, right? What was the other word you said? Complete, right? Dwelling in tents, he stayed home. What else? How is he described? What does his name mean? Huh? Yeah, supplanter. What does that mean? Devious, right? It means deceiver or supplanter. So he's devious, and he is a replacement. Right? It's tricky. Okay, so what characteristics of Jacob are mentioned? Outward or inward? Inward. What characteristics of Esau are mentioned? Outward or inward? Outward. Interesting. Okay. So in verse 28, we've already talked about that, where Isaac loves Esau because he brought the meat. Rebekah loved Jacob. My guess would be because of that promise, knowing that he is going to be the leader, right? She's hanging around that. She's influencing that. Okay. In verses 29 through 34, we see how their names are reflected in their actions. Right? In the story of the selling of the birthright, we have Esau in 30, coming in faint. Feed me, I pray thee, with that same red pottage, for I am faint. Therefore was his name called Edom. Okay, so what is Esau focused on? His stomach, right? His flesh. I'm faint. I'm going to die. Guess what? Feed me. Is that a wrong thing? When you're hungry to eat? No, it's not. It's a natural tendency, right? But what happens when when our flesh then influences or is influenced by our sin nature? This is man, I did not want to go here because this is big. We all have natural tendencies. The natural man has tendencies, food, survival, etc., right? We are now influenced by our sin nature. Adam's sin brought that into the world. So, is eating wrong? No, that's a natural tendency. But when it's influenced by our sin nature, where does that go? What does that turn into? Turns into gluttony, right? Okay. Or our mind is clouded and our decisions get messed up because of that sin nature, right? We also then have, as Christians, the Holy Spirit, right? So we have, the natural man has tendencies that then can be, as Christians, influenced by the Holy Spirit, or our sin nature, and these two are fighting against each other. All the time, every day, right? So we can either do what God wants us to do, or we can take anything that is a natural tendency down the path of into, gluttony, in this case with eating. Chuck, you had your hand up?
We have an example here, and what in other places in the Bible tells us about Esau, that his flesh was more important than what God wanted him to do, his birthright.
Yeah.
That was his birthright, and he would have gotten it. What comes to mind is Cain and Abel, and what God said to Cain.
What did God say to Cain?
He said, well, if you do well, that you would rule over Abel, that his desire would be for you. But he turned around and talked to Abel and slew him.
Yeah, sin was at the door.
He despised or disregarded God's confirmation that he'd be accepted, that he would.
Sure.
The same thing's going on here. Not vile in nature, because Esau wasn't think he would want to kill him or something. But
so is Esau's thinking in this situation right or wrong? He's not thinking at all.
not really. That's why he minimized who he was.
Sure.
Born, he had the birthright, but because he did this,
Yeah.
He belittled what was his, and therefore it wasn't his anymore.
Right. Rick.
When Esau and Jacob were born, they gave them names.
Yeah.
And those names, they don't just give them any old name. Those names had a meaning.
Yeah, those names have meaning.
And I think Rebecca knew that Jacob was going to deceive him because she gave him that name.
Okay.
And then we see that later when, when she tells Jacob, hey, you do this, and go deceive him.
Because what
Deceive your father.
what is Jacob trying to do in 31? Because you're right, the names do have meaning. What is Jacob trying to do in verse 31?
Trying to get the birthright.
Right? He's not even trying to trick him. It's pretty obvious. Right? He's doing business. But what his name means is to supplant or to replace. He's replacing him. He's trying to replace him. Right? Well, let's go back for a second. Is Esau's thinking wrong? Randy.
Defeat Jacob's trickery.
Well, there's no trick there. He's just straight up taking it. He's just straight up taking it. But is he wrong in saying, look, if I'm dead, I really don't have a birthright anymore, do I?
Yeah, he's wrong because the Bible says he despised his birthright.
Okay, so what does that mean? What does it mean to despise?
He didn't esteem it. He didn't want to hold his rightful position because it wasn't important to him. It wasn't important to him to do what God wanted him to do in his rightful position.
Okay. So he despised it. He despised his birthright, as we're told later on, right? In Hebrews there. So yes, his thinking then is wrong. Rick's got his hand up, and then Peter.
Well, in the beginning when the Lord told Rebekah that there was going to be two nations and the younger was going to serve the older, yeah. I couldn't ever figure out why Rebekah would go ahead and tell Jacob to go and deceive, but I think she knew all that along. That's, all the time, and that's why Rebekah told Jacob, hey, you go and I'm going to put hair on you.
Yeah.
And I think she knew it all along.
Yeah, she knew all along what was going to happen. And she saw the opportunity to speed things up when, in the stealing of the blessing, much like the issue with Abraham and Hagar, right? We look and see, well, this is taking too long. I see an opportunity here. This must be the way, or at least a way, right? And we'll see where that takes us, right? Let's see, what else? So we had in 32, then we have Esau focusing on the outward, right? His hunger, but then focusing on what was temporary, right? We have temporary results that have lasting consequences, right? And if we think about how that applies to us spiritually, similar in the way we talked about Abraham and the choices that he made and the ramifications that they had for generations, right? But yet we don't go to the Lord and ask the Lord about things that we definitely should, right? How important then is what Rebekah did in 23? Where'd she go? Where did she inquire of the Lord? 22. Yeah, in 22. She went and inquired of the Lord. How important is that for us to inquire of the Lord? Right? We see examples of that. David, he inquired of the Lord often. Like when he's in Keilah, right? Should I go down there? Yeah, go down there. Am I going to win? Yeah, you're going to win. Are these guys going to come down? Yeah, they're going to come down. Are they going to give me up? Yes, they're going to give me up. Where should I go? Right? But then in other important things, we see him not inquiring of the Lord and things go sideways. Right? What does that tell us? right? How often, right? We talked about how it should be a continual thing, right? Where does God want us? He wants us close to him. He wants us to ask him things. He wants to direct us. He's not going to send you into a brick wall, right? He has what your best interest in his mind, heart, right, for us, right? This is where we belong. Unfortunately, we are going to have to conclude our epic adventure through God's Word today with that and pick up next week.